Welcome to Jung at Harp, episode number 183, Garden Variety Creativity. What is it? We're going to explore that together this morning. I am Kathleen Wiley, a Jungian psychoanalyst in North Carolina, and I am here with Deborah Henson-Conant, who is a composer, a mentor, a creative. We both play the harp, and that's why we call this Jung at Harp. And we both have passions about bringing our whole self to whatever we do. And so we come together almost weekly to have a conversation. We don't start with answers, but we start with a question that's perking for us and maybe perking for you. So if you're joining us live, hopefully you are on a platform where you can type in your comments and join in our conversation. And we will see if by the end of today, if we have any idea what garden variety creativity means and what it does for us. So, DHC, do you want to tell us about your grandmothers? Because that's we kind of circled around the idea of garden variety creativity.
Yeah, I will, and I want to say that this idea came up this morning, in terms of thinking about our relationship to our hands as tools, what that brings to us, what else happens when we're engaging in music with our hands. If our hands is a second mouth, what our hands do, what the gestures are, what will we do without hands, all these questions I was thinking about. But this takes me back to my grandmothers, Anna and Edith. Anna was from Russia. She escaped, and she was first generation American, as was my grandfather. And to her, music was high art. It was about the highest form of expression, and opera was one of the highest forms of that art. I think this is one of the reasons that both my mother and my aunt became opera singers. And therefore, I got to experience human beings transforming from a normal, everyday human being into high art, meaning a transformative moment of a human into something larger than human, larger than life, who embodies story at a deep level. I got to see that all the time in my home. My mother played one piece on the piano, Fur-Elise. That was it. That's all she played. That was her piece. My grandfather played one piece on the piano, Poet and Peasant Overture or something. That was it. Everybody got hushed when they played. That was that world of art. My grandmother Edith, who was I don't know how many generation from Sweden, farmer, music was a huge part of her life as well. But this was what she said about it. People have to sing. They have to eat their peas. They got to sing. They got to do these things. People got to sing, and someone has to keep them together. That's why you play music, or that's why you play the piano. So people have to sing. Someone's got to keep them together. That's why you play the piano. So her way of looking at music was, it is a community service. Literally, it was like somebody always has to play the piano. Wherever you go, somebody has to play the piano. And everywhere we went, there was a piano. That's what it was like in the late 50s, early 60s. And so it was a journeyman, a garden variety. It was a farmer's music, meaning it was there as a service, as a function, as a community function. And it was so interesting to grow up with both this high art experience of transformation of the individual, and the other experience of deepening and the engagement on a community level. And I think that's one of the reasons why I got very interested in playing with orchestra, and why I named my orchestra project Invention and Alchemy, because invention is all about a single mind, this amazing thing that comes out of an individual. And I use the word alchemy about what happens when people make music in community. Something happens that you can't, it happens because there's more than one of us. doing something, kind of like in our conversation. Because when we started talking about this, you said something, and I was like, you said something that Jung says, something about together. You talked about somebody else who has a book, Thinking Together, or something like that, and then you talked about Jung saying something about how this something only happens together, and I was like, my God, that is the answer to the golden cage. That's the so this is what so this idea of um, garden variety artist and a journeyman artist. I don't even know exactly what journeyman means, but it's something that, I mean, in Hip Harp Academy, some people are learning to be performers, or they're creating their own work, or they're creating art, and some people are there to create community. And while it's kind of the same, they're both using the harp, they're both using music. Both of those things are very powerful and important, and I love working with both of them. And I love having both in my life. And I love the transition between them. And I love an orchestra because I love being a soloist with an orchestra, because I love observing this large thing, this orchestra, which is one sound together. And then, boop, one voice comes up, and you hear that voice being supported by the rest. And then, boop, it comes back. And it's a different form of playing when they're playing soloistically versus when they're playing as part of the ensemble. And that is what I have to say.
Well, there's so many important nuances in what you're saying. I want to pick up on the community piece, because I'm struck by your grandmother Edith, and I'm also struck by your grandmother Anna in different ways. But your grandmother Edith, who says, you got to sing, everybody's got to sing, and somebody's got to keep them together. So you got to play the piano. And, art, there's a whole movement in the therapeutic world, including Jungian psychoanalysis, of incorporating art. I mean, there are certifications in music therapy.
Right.
There are certifications in art therapy, because there is this acknowledgement and recognition that there is something that happens in the community with an expression, an other outside of yourself. And it just so happens my diploma thesis, when I was in analytic training, the very sterile title is the interrelationship of the earthly marriage to the inner spiritual marriage. So it was all about the interplay of how outer world relationships, particularly the most intimate of relationship, facilitates and is necessary for the deepest inner relationship of our conscious and unconscious selves, so that we're living as a unified self. So Jung says, and I quoted this in my diploma thesis, he says, wholeness is a product of the synthesis of I and you. And I don't mean the integration of another person, but I mean an integration of all of the parts of myself that other mirrors back to me. And so that we need each other in order to know ourselves. And that's part of why we come together almost weekly to have conversation, is because we discover things about ourselves, and we discover things about the greater reality that matter and resonate for us with each other, and with those of you who join in. And hi, Donald and Green Rose, welcome. That we discover things about ourselves. And Annie Murphy Paul, the science writer, in her book, The Extended Mind, one of her sections is on thinking with other people. And she shows scientific research that proves that there's something happened, that what is the mathematical principle? The sum of the parts is greater than
the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And so this is that mathematical principle at play. And she looks at scientific research that supports that. That book also, has a section on thinking with the body, which I think is so important for us too, because being present to our instrument, being present to one another, being present to our larger self, and that in us, which is just becoming known, is key. So when you talk about garden variety creativity and you go back to your grandmothers, I immediately pick up on this importance of community and how ultimately creativity creates community. And even the opera,
Mm,
the opera singer assumes a larger than life character. I always think about opera as and you use it, it's like larger than life.
right.
It's like suddenly you step into this archetypal role, this largesse that allows something to be activated in the listener and the viewer, as well as the other participants.
I'd like to say something about that because I had the privilege to be on tour with Steve Vai, who is a legendary guitarist,
Mhm.
um, played with Frank Zappa, legendary. And one of the things as you were speaking, I was thinking opera singers are loud. And they're loud in a way that if other people were loud, they would probably be told they were yelling or screaming. And they're super expressive. And the way Steve Vai played, so I was on tour with him for 6 months in his band, and I got to watch him every night. So I was behind him and I was watching the audience. And I began to notice that, how he it was operatic the way that he played.
Mhm.
And especially in certain halls, I remember one night there was just this high note that he came to, and it was just like, wow, that's what people experience in an operatic concert hall. And every night I would see, all around the world, tiny halls, big halls, there would be two guys in the front row, and they would be together, and they would be like, one might have his arm around the other or something like that, but they were together, and they'd be like, and you could tell. I mean, I don't know if I'm expressing it, but it was clear. I got one night, I was like, oh my God, he is expressing for men this
Mhm.
this extreme expression, this incredible, powerful lyricism that I've
Mhm.
only other else seen in opera. And he was expressing it for men in a way that they could like experience and feel it and embody it and want to emulate it. And I saw how powerful that was. And it
Mhm.
made me understand opera in a way I never had before.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Well, there's the power of community right there, and the power of that, wholeness. That wholeness is a product of a synthesis of I and you. That you saw those men connecting with something deep in themselves, vis-a-vis Steve Vai.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I just as you were saying this, I just realized it was always two together. I mean, it wasn't or
Mm.
more. It was not one guy acting like that. It was two guys, and it was almost as if they were saying, "See, yes, this is it. This is
Mhm.
what I'm talking about. This is what I feel." It was just I'll never forget that. The magnificence of being able to watch the audience
Mhm.
experience this man.
Well, and to tap into their passion, his
Yes.
expression of passion, because that's whenever I think of opera, I always think of passion.
Huh.
you know, because it's such an unashamed, in your face expression of passion, whatever the emotion is of that character. you know and so to be able to be in touch with our deepest passions, our deepest affects, which most of us have been trained to be terrified of, and so the music allows that. And I think, for me, when I come to my heart, for me as an instrument of healing, for me, then what I find is it does allow me to connect with something that I'm feeling deep, deep inside of me that I don't have words for.
Mhm. Mm.
That when I
Right.
find the right note, or the right sequencing of notes or chords, or I find the right rhythm that I can just relax into, that I can let carry me, that is connecting me with something on a very deep feeling level. And so this garden variety creativity that your grandmother Edith, coming from her Swedish farming background, had, in a way, was the everyday entree into the passionate high art of the opera your grandmother Anna valued.
Yes. And I was just thinking as you were talking, I was thinking about this poem by Oliver Wendell Holmes that's it says, "A few can touch the magic string, and noisy fame is proud to win them. Alas for those who never sing and die with all their music in them."
Mm.
And I know he was speaking, or I think he was speaking about, and because in many ways he was a garden variety creative, meaning I happened to be an expert on him for a while because Harvard Medical School had hired me to write a play about him for their 200th anniversary. And so I got to be immersed in this man. Wow, I just realized I've gotten to be immersed in these amazing men. But I got to be immersed in him, and I know that it was painful for him that he was never famous like Lowell or Whittier or whatever, any of those. I mean, maybe his friends. I don't know. What do I know about history? I've forgotten of it. But anyway, but I haven't forgotten the emotion of it, that of him saying, I could have been great if only I'd stuck to one thing. In other words, but I couldn't, because everything is so beautiful, and he became a sort of a synthesist, and I feel like Edith was in a sense a synthesist, meaning she was a journeyman artist. She was a garden variety creative. She was creative with so many things, and it was always something very garden variety. For example, when we went to the seashore, we would collect kelp, this kelp that had this in this certain shape, and then we would take it home and we would make dolls out of it. And that was her. It was always like that. It was always make something out of something. I mean, maybe because she went through the depression, I don't know. We didn't talk about that. But what I see in the academy, and what I love about being deep inside the process of people who are longing to live a life with an instrument, I see these two things. I see some people longing, for creating something larger than life, and some people longing for creating something that is very simple and very, and they're both so the impulses are so beautiful. And I realize I have those impulses too. And I want to tell a story. I was playing a wedding years and years and years ago, and we'd hired a singer who I really loved, a woman named Jan Greeley. And we were playing this wedding. In the middle of the wedding, she got up in front of everybody and she said, "Okay, everybody, let's sing a song together. Let's sing 'You Are My Sunshine.'" And I was like, "Are you, what? What? Yeah, I'm an artist. I'm not doing that." I mean, like, I was horrified. I thought she was ruining everything. And she got everybody to sing. They loved it. It was incredibly fun. And this moment, I mean, there's lots of moments that change our lives, but this was a moment when I was like, oh, you think you're like, la, 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 I'm the artist. And look what happened here. Look what just happened. Look at that magic. And it changed, what I saw in my life as valuable, and opened me up to the understanding what Edith was doing and all of that.
Yeah.
We're getting some comments. I want to see what people are saying. Okay. I always think how brave we are to pull these up before we read them. I think there's also something about doing things in a group, that because it is accepted, you are free to express yourself in that way. When the group is of the same mind. Yes. And then he says, and when they are not unified in mind, it can be a negative experience. Right. So if everybody else is doing garden variety and you come out there and you start being, diva, it is not a satisfying experience for anybody.
Right. Yeah. You know, as you were talking before you got to the story about the wedding,
Yeah.
um, I was thinking about how we automatically, collectively, the idea of garden variety feels less than, and
Right.
high art feels like, oh, it's up here. And you know what Donald is saying about when it's safe in community when the group is of the same mind, and how I interpret that is it means when we recognize it's all on an equal playing field. That this expression that's called high art really is no better than this garden variety. I mean, the idea of your grandmother, this so touches me. I mean, I felt so moved internally, and I thought, oh, how beautiful to go to the beach with your granddaughter and collect kelp and teach her how the kind of kelp that's needed, that's going to actually hold up through the process, and then to make kelp dolls. There was something about that connection to the creative source and to life that sustains us, that I mean, it gives me chilly bumps. I mean, it's the living that life of beauty and balance that doesn't get caught up only valuing one side and devaluing the rest. And that goes back to Donald's comment. You know, if we are of the same mind, to me again, that means we value all sides. We don't polarize. And I think that to be in spaces and conversation with people, with you, with those of you who join us, where each of us bring a piece of the puzzle and we put it all together. It's you know, it all has its place. And without each piece, we're not whole. Now we're back to
Mm.
Jung's comment, you know. We
Yeah,
need all those pieces.
yeah, and that's really interesting what you said. I want to pull something up that a postscript that Donald put there in a second. Um, I never thought of her thinking about that. That was the kelp. I always thought of her as choosing kelp that already had the look of a doll, which is interesting because as you said that, and you were saying, and I was like, oh no, I think she chose it for this reason. Who knows?
Right.
Because she told me other things that for other reasons. Um, we can talk about corn later on and worms, um, but I think she also taught me to see nature in an anthropomorphic way, meaning
Mm-hmm.
what is this piece of kelp looks like a doll. But I just had a revelation as you were speaking that that was very dear to me. That experience. I don't know if I felt it was dear at the time, but I was
Mm-hmm.
very. Um, I had no judgment about it. Someone was teaching me something creative, and it was fun, and we did it together. And later on, I had a lot of trouble in my life because her sister. She had three sisters, and they sent me Christmas presents every year, birthday presents and Christmas presents. And I had it was traumatic for me because I didn't know how to write thank you letters. I've talked with my therapist about this a lot, this
Mm-hmm.
issue of the gifts. And I think part of the issue, and I never thought about this until just now, was that the gift that stymied me was that her sister sent me dolls. And I just didn't understand why she was sending me dolls, and I couldn't engage with dolls because they were already made. Like there was nothing there to do. Like it's done. And it never occurred to me that that's why I was so stymied. Well, what do you do with this thing? It's
Mm-hmm.
finished.
Mm-hmm.
And then what do you do with it? It's already, you've decided what it looks like, you've decided who it is, and color its hair is, and all that kind of stuff. Like what are you going to do with it? That.
Mm-hmm.
And I had never thought about, anyway, for what that's worth. Let's pull up what Donald said. It's very interesting. He said, he was talking, I'm just going to pull these up in order again. He said, I think there's something about doing things in a group that because it's accepted, you're free to express yourself in that way when the group is of the same mind. Next. But when they're not unified in mind, it can be a negative experience. And I know I have experienced both sides in charismatic churches I've been in. I don't know that much about charismatic churches, but I'm imagining that that would be an even interesting. I don't know. I don't know, but I always think of charismatic as being like as being that thing that's larger than life. And so I'm assuming charismatic churches are a group of, is it a group of people who are all divas? I don't know.
That's an interesting thought. I'm going to let Donald fill that one.
Right.
I mean, I do think charismatic churches, as a general rule, the term refers to people who are much more expressive and demonstrative of their experience of being related to spirit. So there's much more expression. It's not the very tightly prescribed, rigid lectionary that everybody sticks to. So it's much. There's a more free-flowing aspect to that. But I want to say, I think this is part of why the work we do, and I want to say the play we do, I'm trying to get away from the idea that we have to work, but the play of consciousness and the play of music and the play of creativity, the play of exploration and the play of creativity, through all of those things, it can allow us to connect with different aspects of ourself and different aspects of the human experience, of what it feels like. So even your Aunt Edith, who your recollection is, she said, oh, this already looks like a doll. Let's take this one. This one's already coming into that shape. She was also teaching you to observe what's already inherent in the other. And our capacity to observe what's already inherent in our own nature, what's inherent in each other, what's inherent in our instrument, what's inherent in the pen, I think is a part of what we could call garden variety creativity. Because the creativity to me brings forth the inherent nature. It brings forth the beauty. The beauty of what's innately there. And in any institution, any structure, and religions can be religious, and churches can fall into this category, whenever, or in music, let's go back to even music, when only this form and this expression is beautiful and desirable, then there's so much that's left out.
Right.
And so that recognition of the garden variety creativity, I don't know about you all, but when I sit down to dinner, I really want 3 or 4 vegetables out of the garden. I don't want just one.
Right. I mean, I think this is part of what, it's interesting, as you were talking, you were saying demonstrative and expressive. And I was thinking yes, and there are many people in the academy whose intention in learning improv is to actually not be demonstrative, but to be, I don't know how to describe it, because they're accompanying someone's experience of life. Like if they're playing at bedside, or it's a different engagement with music, same instrument. But you also made me think about something that I hear members say over and over again when they kind of have a revelation, when they shift, and I don't know how in tune the harp is, but when they shift from the mindset of, am I playing this right, to the mindset of play the instrument and play something, let the harp sing, and then play into it. Actually hearing what is there first, hearing it. And what I'm playing right now, I would call a snippet, meaning here's this thing that I'm playing that's got this shape. It's just those 2 chords back and forth. And then it creates a resonance into which pretty much you can play any note So you can listen, you can play, you can be musical with very once you get this part, once you get that down, it gives you almost complete freedom to play individual notes up here and be expressive and be musical. And why am I saying all this now? I'm saying that part of what I think comes with the garden variety. I was sitting in the garden yesterday eating lunch and watching the bees, and there was a hummingbird, and I was like experiencing being in the garden. Me experiencing being in the garden versus me going in and saying, okay, garden, let's blah, 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 let's cut the flowers and put them in here and blah, 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 blah. Which I also love. I don't love I don't do that in the garden, but going in the garden and cutting flowers and making a bouquet is one thing, but sitting in the garden and experiencing all the variety of what is in the garden. And what's the thing that I think is coming out to me is, oh my God, what one person, one instrument, what a world.
What a world, and what a beautiful garden. And I just flashed on, there are very manicured, orderly, high art gardens, right?
Correct.
All around the world. So, this idea of garden variety somehow implies that there can also be that there's a beautiful synergy. There's a beautiful synergy of the things that are in the garden. And I know landscape architects, that's part of what they have an eye for is, okay, what's this combination here? That's going to bring this synergy that's going to be beautiful year round?
That is very interesting. You're talking about that. Okay, I'm just going to bring up this comment. A garden variety from a family of generations of farmers. Interesting. Yes. Well, you can see the value, how that would be valued. And it was funny a minute ago, Kathleen, you were saying something about how standing up for the value of that. And I'm pretty sure that comment was said to me as an antidote for something that was happening in the other side of the family. The other side of the family, well, we're great artists. And then well, everybody's got to sing. Someone's got to keep them together. That's why you play music, okay? It's kind of like this war of the point of music, and the beauty of being a kid in that world is getting both of them. And I think the beauty of that for me, it just occurred to me, was one of my most satisfying things is to be on stage with a symphony orchestra, having the audience sing, being able to create things in which I can mechanize or create the architecture for a world in which I get to experience those two things at once.
Right.
And that I also get to invite the audience. I mean, like, hey, everybody, here's what it feels like to sing with an orchestra in the room. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So yes, we come with that, and the value of each of these things. I think this, and I keep coming back to journeyman, because I find that sometimes I like to teach. I don't know what a journeyman is. I'm going to look it up in AI afterwards. I think it's somebody who's good at putting together. Maybe somebody can tell me what it is, but it's what I love to do. I love to show people, hey, everybody, look, you can do this. You can put this chord, and then you can move this. And if you even if you can barely do it, even if you have only two fingers on each hand, you can do that, and then it creates this thing. And in that thing, you can do this thing. I think for me, that's the journeyman part of it. It's here's how you can make a thing in a moment that will let you step into the world of being an artist, being a musician in that moment, regardless of what your technical ability is. And what I find people have trouble doing is believing that it is beautiful and playing it as if they are doing something beautiful, and really, really enjoying that. The way as a child, I it's like having that cape again. It's like saying, I'm playing. It's amazing. It's amazing. That's the greatest line ever. Like playing all the gestures of great art with something very simple. I don't know. What am I talking about, Kathleen?
Well, I just was flashing back on your Aunt Edith saying, everybody's got to sing and somebody's got to keep them together. It's like she was providing a counterbalance to this kind of snootier attitude that looked down on that which we naturally do, and to let ourselves do what we naturally do, and to value what we naturally do, and discover the beauty in that. And I think with the harp, or with any instrument, or with whatever it is, with cooking, with our selection of clothes, with making kelp dolls, if we can value what resonates for us in the moment, if we can value that which comes from within us, I mean, that the garden variety creativity is like, okay, how do I value what's coming from within myself, and not get hung up on, well, it's not like this one, it's not like that one, it's not doing this, it's not doing that, it's not meeting that standard, it's not meeting, and so it's not valuable.
Right.
Because the garden and garden variety, there are all kinds of gardens. There's the wildflower garden. There's the garden of weeds that are often wildflowers. There's the manicured queen's garden. I mean, there's the, I can't remember as a child many times going to the manicured gardens in Williamsburg. I mean, there are so many different kinds of gardens. And if we can allow ourselves to value the garden that resonates with us
as you
in
were
the moment we're in.
Sorry,
That's
can
okay.
you just say that again? The garden that resonates with us
in the moment we're in.
Okay, so I'm sorry I interrupted that, because that is exactly what I was thinking. The image that I was getting was what I've heard of, concentration camp in, World War II, and there being a flower that had, and this is, I don't know if it's apocryphal or whatever, but the fact is, some small flower that grew in a place that everyone was tromping past, and that everyone protected that flower, that one little flower. And what I'm hearing you say, and what I wish I could, put in the heart of every person, but especially every person that I teach, is, and touch it, whatever, is that one flower was epitomized garden. It is a garden. And the garden the variety of what garden means in the world, it can be so meaningful, and it can be so small, and yet, but it's the opening, it's the doorway to nature, to that engagement, one little thing. And I wish I could instill the appreciation in each person for the garden that they can create the minute they engage with this instrument.
Yeah, that was what was coming to mind for me, and as kind of my parting thought, is that when you see that flower in yourself, whether it's about, your life's passion, or it's about your music, which may be your life's passion or whatever, then protect it. Every time you go by it, be with it, commune with it, let it bless you, bless it. Nurture that one flower, protect it and nurture it, because your grandmothers, each in their own way, protected their flower.
That's a strange way to say it, Kathleen. But you're right. In each way, my grandmothers were fierce protectors of the value of the garden that they lived in.
Yes. Yeah.
the last thing that I want to say, oh, it's time for us to leave, about the journeyman, is that the journeyman creates a simple structure in which that garden can grow.
Mm-hmm.
And those two things are so, because they bring that garden into the world through each person,
Mm-hmm.
not through sitting in the, I mean, it's fine to sit in the audience and watch people up there, but that there is that garden that each person brings.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Kathleen. I'm full of what just happened and what I got from this conversation. And thank you so much to Tovla and Donald and Kathleen and Rose. Thank you so much for joining us in this conversation. And thank you, Kathleen, for this ongoing conversation that I just look forward to every week.
Yes.
And I'll see you next week.
Visit jungatharp.com for show notes, contact links, and to follow the ongoing conversation. That's Jung, as in Carl Jung, the famous psychoanalyst, and harp, as in the many-stringed instrument.